President Trump has no understanding of economics and statecraft, that he has damaged the relationship between India and the United States, that he has pushed India closer to Russia and China. Modi is smart. Modi is playing his cards, and he's reminding the US that he has a choice. Look, I don't know why anyone would take anything that Navarro says seriously. This is the guy that is alleged to have made up quotes in a book. This is not Modi's war. This is Putin's war. India is a super important player in the 21st century. It's only going to get more powerful.
Ed, thank you so much for talking today, and I really appreciate your time. If you could just introduce yourself, your full name, please, and how you want us to designate you.
Sure thing. So my name is Ed Price, and I'm an independent analyst who also teaches at NYU.
Great. I don't know if you've seen the remarks from the Oval Office today. When asked about removing tariffs on India today, President Trump stated that we get along very well with India, but at the same time, he did make references to the tariffs that are imposed in India on U.S. companies. Now, how should this seemingly contradicting messaging be interpreted? And what does this trajectory of this relationship from its origins to the present moment reveal about the underlying tensions?
Well, thanks for having me on. I used to think that President Donald Trump had a very poor understanding of economics and statecraft. And I realize now that that was wrong. And in fact, President Trump has no understanding of economics and statecraft. That is the only conclusion that I can draw, given the way that he's behaving towards India. Now, there is some case in a sort of good old-fashioned great power competition to have China and the USA go at it against each other. There's some case for Russia and the USA to go at it against each other. It's one of our national hobbies. It's one of their national hobbies. But there is absolutely no reason, particularly in the current moment, to have the United States and India clash like this. It wasn't necessary, and it was entirely the doing of the US side. Yes, India does place tariffs on items. I mean, by the way, so do we now. But the point is that India has a developing economy. So the entire conception of the post-war order was that those economies that were developing rather than developed would get the ability to put a higher tariff on goods. So I really don't know what he's talking about. I think that he has damaged the relationship between India and the United States. And it seems to me that he either does not understand the US national interest or is actively working against it, which is mind-blowing.
Just a few days ago, we did see a united front that appears to be forming, which is President Xi Jinping, flanked by President Putin and Prime Minister Modi, all together in one frame, in one picture. How has President Trump's tariff strategy really backfired and strengthened the alliance that the United States has sought to counter over these years?
Yes, I don't know that President Donald Trump has sought to counter anyone effectively. He seems to give Vladimir Putin whatever he wants. He doesn't really seem to be able to hold the line in his tariff war with President Xi Jinping. But yes, it does seem that he has pushed India closer to Russia and China. I would just put a little word of warning on that, though. It comes with a health warning, because it is not the case that India, China, and Russia are the best of friends. I mean, this is an outsider speaking. I'm a Westerner and a US citizen. But it's pretty obvious with reference to history, as you just mentioned, that the Chinese and the Russians have a long-term complaint with each other. If I was Moscow, I'd be most worried about Siberia rather than Ukraine, to be honest with you. And of course, the Chinese and the Indians have very deep civilizational differences and a border dispute right up until the present day. So yes, President Trump has pushed Modi closer to Putin and Xi, but I wouldn't look at that visual that we saw, that compelling visual, and think that it is necessarily the case that those three men will now always work together. Modi is smart. Modi is playing his cards, and he's reminding the US that he has a choice.
Now, some serious allegations coming in from Jake Sullivan, who has accused Trump of sacrificing India relations to advancing family business interests in Pakistan. To what extent might personal financial considerations be influencing the broader foreign policy decisions by the Trump administration, particularly keeping Pakistan in mind?
Well, Jake Sullivan is a partisan political actor, so I won't remark on his views. I'm an independent analyst, but it does seem that the president of the United States has active financial interests. And this is a departure with what's always traditionally been the case, right? Which is that presidents are not supposed to have active financial interests. And I'm afraid to say we'll never know. I mean, it's almost impossible to get to the bottom of what exactly those interests are. We just know that they exist. One example that is pretty well documented at the same time as not being very well documented is this meme coin scam, and these various sort of coins that pop up. People try and buy them; they're pulled out. You know, it's all very shady. So yes, I would say that the president of the United States probably does have some sort of personal active financial interest, which is a departure from the norm. But someone like me from the outside, I have no information. I don't really know what those interests are.
Right. Now, if we talk about, some allegations by some Trump loyalists, Peter Navarro, to be precise, he used inflammatory language referencing this war in Ukraine as Modi's war and making derogatory comments. How significantly might such rhetoric damage this bilateral relationship?
Well, look, I don't know why anyone would take anything that Navarro says seriously. This is the guy that is alleged to have made up quotes in a book that he wrote, quotes from himself. So again, Navarro is one of these characters that I think is probably a little bit off-piste intellectually as well as in terms of the administration's policy. That said, he has a position of influence. We're talking about him right now, and probably that is something that the Indians will note. By the way, in defense of Modi, this is not Modi's war. This is Putin's war. Putin's war. So it's very strange to me that the United States has an official who is making remarks like that. And let's bring it back to the start of our conversation, if I can. The United States has every interest in making friends, deeper friends with India right now. If I was running US trade policy, which obviously I'm not, but if I was running US trade policy, I would have India tariffs at 0%, not 50. So Navarro, honestly, not someone that I take seriously.
Foreign policy experts have warned that pressurizing India to abandon Russia could drive it deeper into the Moscow sphere of influence, because historically this relationship has been that strong. Are we witnessing this prediction materialize through India's increased BRICS engagement alongside with Brazil, who's also been slapped by heavy tariffs?
Well, there is no Moscow sphere of influence, and that's Putin's entire problem, right? He's trying to rebuild the old Soviet empire. So there is no Moscow sphere of influence. There is a Chinese sphere of influence, which Russia is a part of right now. Now, if you're asking whether India under Modi is willingly becoming a part of that sphere of influence, which is effectively the Chinese sphere of influence, no. Let's just go back and remember our Indian history to some degree. India is an independently minded sovereign with its own civilization. It makes its own choices. It, of course, basically led the non-aligned movement during the Cold War. So there's no way that India is going to permanently put its feet one side or other of a line, and especially not when it looks at what's happened to Russia, which is essentially a form of economic conquest by China. So my personal interpretation is that Modi's being pretty smart. He is reminding the Americans, he's reminding people like me that he has options, but he's not fully embraced China and Russia and is not attending the military parade, for example.
Well, my last question is, what concrete diplomatic and economic steps could actually reverse this current downward trajectory before the United States potentially loses what many analysts consider as the most crucial 21st century partnership?
I consider it the most crucial 21st century partnership. The partnership between India and the United States will effectively decide what happens between China and Russia. I've put this a different way before, which is to say that India has the deciding vote in the 21st century. If India chooses the US versus China, or if India sits out of any US-China competition, it will effectively decide the outcome. So India is a super, super important player in the 21st century. It's only going to get more powerful. And like I say, I can't for the life of me understand why the president of the United States, in a confrontation with China, in a war, if you think about it, with Russia, would deign to put 50% tariffs on India. So I think the number one thing that we could do of two is remove that 50% tariff and get it down to something far more reasonable. I suggest 0%. And the second thing we can do is apologize.